great.
Thank you very much.
And I particularly remember you when you worked as Minister of Industry in Vajpayee government. At that time, as an analyst, I always compared the policies of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, with that of the Romans. I had always felt that the basic success of the Romans was the infrastructure that they had created. Wherever they went, they created roads at that time. And it was Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government, and you being part of that, you thought of a wonderful way at that particular time that we had a huge workforce which was unskilled. And we had a huge middle class which was in a fix, which wanted to own two houses at that time, which wanted to actually own houses, have a car also. So you brought about two very simple changes. Your government at that time brought about two very simple changes. Number one, availability of loans, easy loans to the middle class. And number two, the fillip you gave for the construction of infrastructure where this unskilled roads, unskilled labor could be easily employed. And that created such a symbiotic and ebullient environment, economic environment, which was self-supporting, where demand for wage goods, supply of wage goods, supply of money, and productive utilization of resources, which were not utilized at that time, that was wonderfully created. That was an example for the world to emulate. Somehow, I feel that economists did not give it as much importance and significance in their writings as they should have given. But the results are for us all to see that by 2004, country had been taken to a different pedestal. It is a different issue that the government did not repeat. But whatever the subsequent government from 2004 to 2010 could accomplish, that happened because of the foundations laid at that particular time. And this is being recognized by every honest economist, by every honest analyst. And today, we have Modi government with a slightly different orientation, and it has started a different sort of reforms. The reforms which were given fillip to by your government in 1999 onwards, that has been given a different orientation. And with this crisis that we have now, the whole world is facing it, FDI is going to be one of the major engines, as I think, for taking the country out of the economic straits that we will definitely face. Although there are very good, very good quality of stimulus package that has been introduced. But FDI will have to play a very important role, sir. And we would definitely like to be enlightened by you with all your experience, how this FDI, number one, can be attracted in the country, and how it can be brought in the areas where it has been shine. For example, in defense area, the FDI has not come. It is abysmally low. And we want that if Make in India program has to become successful for making the country really self-reliant in terms of defense production, then it has to come there. And of course, the topic today that has been given to you is about real estate and related areas. I personally would like to listen to you on the FDI in defense also, sir. I welcome you, sir, heartily. And nobody could be better than you to have come to Shri Ram College of Commerce and share your thoughts and analytical ideas for the growth of our country and for, of course, the personal growth of us all. Sir, over to you. We will like to hear from you now, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor, for giving such a fantastic perspective and a background to this program. I'm very impressed with your analysis, and thank you very much for being so objective, so perceptive, and so informed about all the issues, and really thank you for giving this very good background. I also thank my dear students for participating in this program. yours is a very enlightened organization, very good institution, education institution, very not only recognized but respected. And therefore, I'm very honored by the fact that I've been able to join you in this program. Though I've been there quite a few times on the campus, and this time, of course, off campus, but talking to the same audience, hopefully. Let me, Professor, I will touch that point when I come to the FDI part. But if you permit me, because there are three, in my opinion, three different segments. One is the automobile sector, other is real estate sector, and third part is FDI. Now let's look at it like this. Why do we consider these three, in a way, very separate and very unique in their own ways, all these different issues? Why should we think together? As you correctly pointed out, at particularly at this point of time, we as a country, we as a society, must think about very innovative ways of tiding over this crisis. I remember when I was the Industries and Commerce Minister, I had said, and I drafted a new industrial policy for India. And no one better informed than Professor will tell us that there's only two times in the past we had industrial policy. One was in 1956, which was industrial resolution. And second was in 1991 after Narasimha government decided to work on a very comprehensive package of reforming the Indian economy. So they decided to dismantle controls, remove all restrictions, and the industrial policy was launched. When I was making the third one under Narendra Modi government, and it was already drafted and it is on the website. One key element of that was, which I had said, that while we need to get new industries into India, we should not forget the existing industries. Because while we want the new technologies come to India, and therefore they will also use their own strength to bring in more dynamism into the economy, the present industry is also equally important. And therefore today, actually we are facing a very unique situation actually in the world. One is a health crisis. Other one is economic crisis. The third one is already, we are on the cusp of it, was the fourth industrial revolution, which was essentially fueled by the new technologies, emerging technologies, whether it's blockchain, whether it is Internet of Things, whether it's big data, artificial intelligence, all of that put together, and many more which will be coming. So just imagine, it's like we are actually reinventing the new world. At a time, something by purpose, because we have no choice, because post-COVID, it's a human created issue. The second side is something which was already coming before the advent of this health crisis. And therefore, we have to deal with all this together. And when I said that already, while we need to move on to dealing with the new economy, the new technologies, which are those two key sectors of India's economy, which are the mainstay of India's manufacturing sector, service sector. Let's take example of automobile sector. As you know, under the old series of GDP, automobile was 45% of GDP. It's an existing business. Just imagine the significance, and that's why I'm just giving some numbers. It has, very interestingly, it employs almost 37 million jobs are created in this sector, 3.7 crore jobs. And Professor, These are blue collar jobs, steady jobs, good jobs. Unlike the other jobs, like for example, a delivery boy, he also has a job. But it's not a steady job. So quality of job matters. And this sector, particularly automobile sector, produces quality jobs. One at the end of manufacturing. And it's a very unique sector. Sector of automobiles is a very unique sector. Why is it unique? First, it is a significant part of manufacturing. I said almost 49% of the old GDP series was manufacturing, not industry manufacturing, was coming from automobiles. So obviously it's half of manufacturing. So manufacturing definitely important. But what happens once you make the cars or two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers or commercial vehicle? What do? Somebody has to service it. Otherwise you cannot operate it. Year after year you have to service it. In case of commercial vehicles, there's also regulatory issues. The regulator would say that you must have a fitness certificate coming periodically. So servicing is a must. So just imagine a manufacturing industry has created equal opportunities in service sector. All the service centers, all those people who work to maintain the cars, huge. After sales, servicing. So it's also a significant contributor to the service sector. Another important element of this is that this particular sector is a very important link between farm to market. Can you transport your farm produce to the market without automobiles? You can say, I can use railways, I can use, but even from point of field to the railway track station or the loading point, or from unloading point to the ultimate consumer, you need this sector. Tractors, which are so important nowadays, and so many different kind of farm equipment that you use. Some of this can be qualified as into automobiles. So just imagine, this is a very important sector of the economy. And that sector, while we think about new economy, everything else, you must protect it. The idea would be that we build on what we already have rather than discarding what we have. So automobile cannot be discarded, cannot be wished away. And as you correctly pointed out, Professor, earlier, and I remember those nostalgic days of Atal Bihari Vajpayee when you mentioned it, that a consumer revolution was started wherein banks started giving loans for buying cars. So banks benefited, their retail portfolio increased. At the same time, the automobile sector also benefited. But it was a win-win-win in a way that even those who are buying the cars or two-wheelers or any other kind of automobile, they also benefited because their quality of life improved. So it was a win-win-win situation. Then the downstream effect of all this, whether it's good or bad, I'm a little bit of biased because I have a great feeling for renewables and environment. But even then, the fuel demand increased. That benefited petrol pump, obviously would earn more money. So all of that. More importantly, the automobile sector, another very interesting feature of automobile sector. Those who are end seller of products, whether it's Tata's or Mahindra, TVS or Bajaj or all other heroes, all of them, they sell a product which they assemble on their plants. But just imagine their own supply chain. The bulk of it is manufactured by small scale industries. Auto component makers are more or less in the small scale sector. So just imagine the implication. You may think that the automobile makers are big companies. That's true. But because of that large, big tree already growing and growing, there are so many undergrowth. The small scale industry, which also has fostered the growth of economy in turn, created many jobs in that sector. And just imagine this small scale sector also is undergoing an extremely important transformation, because all of them, while they are part of the supply chain in India to this automobile sector, they also has become part of a global supply chain. When you can make a component so well for an Indian company operating in India, and some of the foreign companies who have set up plants in India, Japanese and Koreans, just imagine their acceptability of a product gives them an entry into the global supply chain. So this particular sector has really created huge opportunity. It's a backbone of India's manufacturing. Therefore, this sector is very important. If you look at it from a fiscal point of view, very interesting. If you look at it from a fiscal point of view, it is almost 1,50,000 crores, 15% of GST comes from this sector. So even the revenues that we generate to take care of social sector will come from it. A very interesting facet. That is again because I was also commerce and industry. So as industry minister, I'm happy because of this performance. But as a commerce minister, I'm very happy to know that $27 billion of exports are from 150 countries are made by the automobile sector. So just imagine, if we can export automobiles, maybe two-wheelers, three-wheelers, or even sometimes four-wheelers, mainly it must be two and three-wheelers, when they go out into the global market for 150 countries, are we not creating brand equity for India abroad? So this is the very important industry from employment perspective, from government revenue perspective, from creating a huge ecosystem of small scale industry. And I'll tell you why, but from that perspective, also from the perspective of footprint on global markets, and also in a way bringing in transformation in the lives of common people. Mobility is very important. If a person gets a two-wheeler or three or a four-wheeler, he always feels that now I'm on my own. I don't have to depend on anybody else. So this is a kind of a dream on wheels, you can say. It's my dream I'm putting on the wheels and I'm traveling. But I'm saying the importance of small scale industry. Why I was saying that? You know, there's a big problem in the world today, not just in India, all over the world. It's a problem of how do you get well distributed, if possible, as far as possible, equitably. When you have small scale industry, such large small scale industry, it is obviously dispersal of wealth that is coming out of one sector, that is automobile sector. So all told, it's a great sector, manufacturing, also supporting services, because you have to take care of services. There are so many thousands of service centers in India. Mechanics, who must be repairing the cars, auto components. There are very good job opportunity. Now this sector therefore needs a revival support properly so that we can revive the economy, India's economy. When you want to revive economy, we have to go by sector. So this one particular sector, and you also pointed out very well initially, that what happened during about 15 years ago. So I think we should try to build on this very important sector. Also importantly is the sector which will currently is expected to lose something like 2,300 crores every day. This is the time of losses they are likely to suffer. So we'll have to work on all the issues together. Manufacturing is so important for India. As our Prime Minister Narendra Modi's program of Make in India. So Make in India is a very important component of India's resurgence as an economy, as well as its emergence as a power. So resurgence would need that you are on your own strength. Service sector, to great extent, depends on manufacturing. Service sector greatly depends on agriculture, because of agriculture insurance. So insurance is a service sector. But if you're not underlying, there is nothing underlying economic activity, what you will service. So manufacturing growth is important for even pulling a service sector. So manufacturing, if it is such an important segment of India's economy, and that too in automobiles, then we'll have to obviously rely on automobiles as a pillion rider for economy to rise. So economy can pillion ride on this, and economy will grow, this sector will also grow. Now, there is a very another interesting sector beside this, because I think there's a positive time and I want to deal with three different segments of it. It's real estate. Actually, construction, real estate, you can put all that together. Again, the biggest employer in India. I would say between on, as I mentioned about manufacturing and service side automobiles, the second most important employer after agriculture would be construction, real estate, and all that basket. Another very interesting thing about construction is, and real estate, the moment you want to construct something, it's very labor intensive. Becoming more and more mechanized, still very, very labor intensive. So job creation happens in geometrical progression. Another important element is, when you want to construct something, you need steel, you need cement, you also need other construction material. And therefore, the demand for manufactured goods rises. Obviously, it will also add to services in many ways. When you construct, 80% of real estate in India is more or less residential. So you'll do something inside your house. When you are building a house, or you're buying an apartment or a flat or a small little bit of a piece of housing space, you like to put something inside. So demand for household goods rises. Whether it is white goods, TV, whatever it will be there. Plus the service sector like architect, legal services, all of that will be in demand. I'll give an example. I was the railway minister. I prepared Narendra Modi government's first plan, and normally the budget is for 1 year. I said I will prepare a 5-year plan. It was 8,56,000 crores. The number of jobs that were created because we decided to increase that capital expenditure to that extent was phenomenal. The demand that came for steel and cement was great. We started increasing the pace of adding new infrastructure, whether it's doubling new lines, electrification. The speed of implementation increased more than double than the previous times. And because of so many measures, I'm not going to it. That's a different subject altogether. But as a result of that, the job creation, the manufacturing activity, service sector also benefited immensely. So real estate is a very, very important segment of our India's economy. And that is where we must now focus on how do you make sure that this sector also benefit. It is estimated that by 2030, this sector would have a growth of almost $1 trillion. I think that's something which is little far cry. That is an industry estimate, but it's 13% of India's GDP. And I personally feel that if you can bring about both these sectors growing at a good pace, can actually help many, many tertiary sectors also to benefit from it. There will be a pull effect. That this sector going up, they'll pull the demand and also do this. But today both are in trouble. And therefore, I thank my friends from your great institution, college, university, for thinking about these two important key elements of how do you revive India's economy. Now let me come to the third part. That's GDP. FDI. See, this is a very important thing. India has to grow at a much higher rate than today to meet a common aspirational goal. And for growth, you need investment. How can you grow without investment? Investment in social sectors, investment in infrastructure, and investment would need savings. Our savings rate has dropped quite a bit in the last few years. Even if our savings rate was as high as it was 30% plus, even then, we also needed a investment rate which was much, much higher to produce bigger output. So the domestic savings itself are not sufficient to make that investment rate possible. There are only other two ways: get foreign loans or get foreign investment. Now, getting foreign loan, you have to service the loan. And again, there would be, has to be at one point of time, will have to be serviced, interest has to be paid. If you get FDI, it is better because it gives you stable investment into the economy. Now that FDI, in which sector it should go, which sector not go, has a lot of connotations. I'll come to that. But getting FDI gives you a little stable, increases your own ability to invest in economy more than your savings rate can allow you to do that. Now the FDI has to be, there are the trade-offs in FDI. FDI, so I said loan, if you take loan, you have to repay. In FDI, you may not have to repay, but you cede ownership. So if you have ownership of a particular asset, which is Indian ownership, now becomes partly, or to what extent you allow the FDI, becomes a foreign ownership. Now there are always very sensitive issues. If you get FDI, somebody can say that Indians are losing control over that asset. But if you have a very calibrated approach, a very sensible approach toward these issues, we can manage both. Because it can be nobody's argument that we don't want India to grow faster. And for India to grow faster, while we increase our savings rate, and even if our increased savings rate, as I mentioned, it was very high a little earlier, even then it was not sufficient to get the kind of growth that we wanted. So getting foreign investment is allowing that growth to happen. But as I said, the other side is the social implication of it. Now to balance both, the government of India under Narendra Modi has been planning a very sensible foreign direct investment policy. In several sectors of economy, including real estate, including manufacturing, including most of it, FDI is allowed. In fact, barring few sectors of economy, FDI is allowed in almost all sectors. And recently, our finance minister announced, and I think that is what Professor was asking me, that they will allow even foreign direct investment into some of the defense manufacturing. Just imagine, and Professor rightly wanted my comments on it, India has become the largest importer of arms in the world. So because we have a very huge border and we share the border with two of our neighbors, our nuclear armed neighbors. We have border disputes with some of our neighbors. And when we have border dispute and there are contentious issues and they are very well armed, and we also, in the interest of our own national security, national sovereignty, we must also have good sound defense policy. So we already have to import something because we don't manufacture enough. So Prime Minister Modi has taken a very forward-looking decision of making as much defense manufacturing as possible in India. Now, if you want to manufacture defense in India, you would obviously need technology, because you want to manufacture something which is of high-ended quality, also must be commensurate with the perception threat that you have. So if your possible adversary is going to have a quality of aircrafts which are quite a few generations in advance than the rest of the others, then we also must have the matching capability. At least, if not a step ahead of them, at least in step with them. So quality of your defense preparedness will depend upon technology. And if you don't have a technology right now, though the DRDO has been working quite a lot on technology development, also done good job, but not in all areas. So in that case, FDI will also bring technology. So we have to work on that in a very calibrated manner. The challenge in India would be now that getting FDI at this particular time is also becoming very interesting. See, in fact, I will tell you something, and Professor knows it better than anybody else. Even before the COVID crisis started, there has been a very worrying trends emerging from the global economy. One, the global economy was slowing. Number two, the global trade was contracting. Number three, the capital flows from one country to another were also slowing down. And as you know, there is direct linkage between investment and trade. So if the investment is going down, the trade was going down, the investment also will be suffering. And therefore, the FDI trends are very worrying trends. And now we, in that context, they've already slowed down. The FDI flows have slowed down considerably. I'm not about India. I'm talking about cross-border flows of FDI. And in that context, to attract FDI, we have to have a very good, robust policy. As I explained, that without FDI, we will not be able to increase the pace of growth because domestic savings rate is not as strong as it should be. In any case, our ability to invest will also into new ideas, new assets will depend upon technology plus money. So FDI can probably address both together. But as I said, it has a very calibrated approach. And to do all this, in a time when the global trends are not as good before even COVID happened, now with the COVID, there are pluses and minuses. What is the plus? The countries have given so much of, brought in so much of liquidity into the economies. Like US has already bought $3.25 trillion, more than India's GDP. Another $3 trillion they're thinking of bringing in. EU. Each nation, EU nation, 27 countries have brought in some package. Now pan-EU package has just been unveiled, about 700 billion or something of that sort. Japan has brought in huge package, Singapore, all countries. So that means liquidity is available. With added dimension that interest rates are going down. But globally, the central banks are reducing interest rates because they want to spur the demand. So interest rate going down, that means cost of capital has been reduced and liquidity is available. So that's a good part that FDI can happen. That's a plus side. But the negative side would be there's a direct link between trade and investment. Globally, the countries are becoming very protective. They are creating borders, they are creating hurdles on global trade flowing. In that case, as there is a direct link between investment and trade, the trade and the trade policies do not conform to the conducive atmosphere that FDI would demand. This may have a challenge. So in that context, we'll have to steer and find out how do you make our India's economy grow. Luckily, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi has a vision. He's trying to work on these ideas. As a Commerce Industry Minister, I had prepared a vision for a $5 trillion economy. And obviously, it depends upon when 5 trillion, whether we'll become 5 trillion for sure. When depends upon the rate of growth. The rate of growth depends upon so many factors, including the investment, which I mentioned, the consumption pattern, and many others. But the COVID has created a different type of a caveat into COVID, that the rate of growth globally is going to slow down, India's and global economy will contract. So therefore, we have to deepen. But when I prepared it, I had very clearly said that more than 1 trillion, 20% will come from industry, 20% of GDP. Today, 16%. Today, our contribution of industry to GDP is 16%. I said we'll take it to 20%, which is $1 trillion in the $5 trillion economy. 60% of that will come from services, and 50%, the 20% remaining will come from agriculture and related services, which is another $1 trillion. But for each of that, we have prepared a plan. I said new industrial policy, how new corridors, industrial corridor will help, how new technology should come in, how we should protect domestic industry. And in that context, construction and automobiles fall in place. Service sector, we had said 12 champion sectors of India's economy will get 50,000 crore, 5,000 crores, which we had set up from the budget, 5,000 crores. We already set up from the budget, which is already available to boost 12 champion sectors of services, which in turn will bring in higher output in services. And third, in agriculture, as Prime Minister has announced a very big package for agriculture reforms to integrate India's agriculture markets only recently. He has announced. But I had prepared a policy for agriculture exports, which in turn will boost farmers' incomes, which is the Prime Minister's vision, but also bring in a possibility of increasing India's share of agriculture into GDP more. So I'll stop here because at 3:45, at the time, as you know, I have to go for other program, Professor. But I will be answering few questions as you would obviously ask me to do. But I must thank you for giving me this great opportunity to be here and to share my, I would not call it thought, because you have far better informed person in Professor there itself in the institute. So there is no need for any guest speaker to come and give you any new ideas. But I'm very happy to be here, to be with you. And please count on me for any help, any support that I can render anytime. And you can call me anytime to contribute to any of the activities of this great institution. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you, sir. So we asked questions while people registered for the forum. So we'll be asking you a couple of questions from the same. So the first question is, do we have a growth scope for the electric vehicle industry in India, especially after the pandemic situation? Is a foreign investment possible in this field?
You know, we obviously have to have a roadmap towards electric vehicles. That's a trend that will definitely follow. But just imagine, the premise for having electric vehicles is based on the fact that that will create a cleaner environment, less emission. So therefore, it all depends upon how are you going to have electricity produced. If you're going to use the grid electricity which is produced by coal, then it doesn't reduce the emission because emission is already there in the system. So we'll have to have a solar powered charging stations. And that is why we need to work on that very effectively. Again, if you look at it, we have got 7,26,000 villages. So the charging station must be there in almost all villages or nearby, because you cannot expect a person to take a two-wheeler and go to some other place to charge his vehicle and go back there. So we'll have to have that necessary infrastructure in place. But India has a plan, and I think we'll have to work together with all the stakeholders and decide the time frame when we want to implement it. So it has to happen in a very careful manner. At the same time, the existing investment that has gone in also must be properly taken care of, while the new investment will be encouraged so that it will happen in a very proper and gradual manner. So it has to be planned like that.
Thank you, sir. So one last question. In the lines of a black swan effect and due to foreign investor sell-off, the value of Indian rupee has fallen in the past few months. So what do you think will be the effect of this on foreign investors, and how can we improve from this situation?
You know, actually, so investment always happens on sentiments. So last few months, globally, it's not nothing that India is the only country which has been affected by it. Globally, the sentiments are very adverse, I would say, or muted, because people, this was a surprise. See, what is the worst thing for a business is uncertainty, lack of clarity. Nobody knew in the world what is the impact of this particular pandemic. Even If you have noticed, United States President said he didn't know it even in month of February. You're saying there's nothing to worry. It's now February, March also, maybe. So last 2 months have been a sweeping change in the atmosphere. Nobody could imagine that US will not have any flights coming from outside. Nobody could imagine that the city of New York, which is full of life all throughout, will be closed down, locked down. So nobody could imagine situation like this. So the sentiments as a result of this curtailment and confinement of people and the economic activity as a consequence of that going down is not positive. But that is temporary. I'm sure it is temporary. See, one of the great thing about human mind is that sentiments improve. But when you're in the morning, you are very bored. In the afternoon, you are fine. And in the evening, you're willing to go for a jog. So I think this is how the human mind is. So I'm sure the sentiments being part of human nature, and we always keep going. Say, suppose when we lose someone, a very dear and near one to us, and we lose him, and he passes away, we all feel so depressed. We say we don't want to do anything. But after some time is the best healer. We come out of it, and then we start building. So same way, it's the sentiment. It will improve, I'm sure. So, is it okay? Hello?
Thank you, sir. So, on behalf of Finance and Investment Cell, we would like to extend our heartfelt